Welcome to Coast View, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. I was so thrilled when I looked at my schedule. I don't actually schedule the guests. I have certainly a lot of input. I don't have anybody on my show that I don't want to have on my show. I'm pleased to say that everyone we've ever asked to be on the show has said yes, and they trust me to have terrific conversations. But anyway, the bottom line is I got the schedule. I saw the Secretary of State, Michael Watson, was going to be on it because I have several passionate issues that I have followed. And if you're a regular listener, you know it. One is human trafficking, major issue around human trafficking. Another is the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund and conservation efforts that can be unleashed in our state. And, we're all concerned about elections, and we want elections to be not only buttoned up so that we can know that everyone, one vote, one person, but more importantly, actually, we want people to vote. And voter turnout in the state is not what it needs to be. In fact, it's abysmal. We can talk about that. Well, anyway, when I saw that Michael Watson was on the list today, I was excited about it. And without any further ado, I don't have any big speeches other than that. Let me welcome the Secretary of State of Mississippi, Michael Watson. How you doing, my friend?
I'm well. Great to be with you as always. Look forward to a good conversation.
It's good to see you. We saw each other. There was an event at Providence, and I was with Alex Littlejohn and Will Primos and a few others. Mm-hmm. And I didn't shoot, actually, because my plan was to kind of bounce around with Super Talk Outdoors. There's still a lot of people I don't know, and I wanted to get to know some folks. But I ended up hanging out with that group for most of the time. And they were really good shots, I might add. For clay shooting, you knew the event. But great to see everybody there. Great to see you there. And when I see you, it reminds me that here is this coast person that actually won a statewide election and has been sort of ubiquitous across the state. You've been engaged in trying to get to every single county, and we'll talk about that in a second. But there's a lot of pride that comes in having a statewide office and being from coastal Mississippi, isn't there?
There is. And I tell people all the time, it's so fun for me to travel the state and just talk about the coast and how I grew up and what we do down here and the economic engine that we are. So having that ability to tell our story around the state has been really important for the coast, and one that I obviously take a lot of pride in, and I'm honored to represent the coast at the statewide level.
One of the things I learned as a publisher is that I never take it for granted that someone knows what a statewide elected official's role is, because so what happens is they'll say Secretary of State, Secretary of State, Secretary of State, and over time they sort of forget all the buckets that are underneath you. You've got a lot to say grace over. You and I have had long conversations about that before, but just in a nutshell, why don't you remind people what the Secretary of State's role is all about?
Yeah, and I love to do that, Ricky, for a couple of reasons. Number one, if people have issues in the areas in which we house under our office, I want them to know. But number two, if something's going awry in one of those areas, I also want to know, hey, who do I hold accountable for that? So under our umbrella, basically elections, everybody kind of knows that's the face of the office. Business services, as you and I have talked, really the breadth of the office is kind of found there with your LLCs, your corporations, nonprofits, sports agents, perpetual care cemeteries. That list goes on and on and on. The APA is found there, Administrative Procedures Act. And then we also have public lands, so 16th section lands, tidelands along the coast. And then several years ago, the legislature gave us basically the state land commissioner title. So we also deal with state lands. And that's where you and I have talked a lot of late, the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund, as well as our Conservation Task Force. So many things happen under that office. And it's really been fun for me to be able to have just the ability to work in different areas of the state.
So let's start to kind of break it all down. You heard what I said at the beginning. Probably, look at public lands. Look at state lands and what you had to say, Grace, over there. It's incredible, really it is. And we'll get to the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund in a second. In fact, I got a note from our friend Joe Cloyd, who serves on the board of trustees for the new organization overseeing the projects, and he asked an important question. And I actually sent him the video of mine and your conversation when you joined me on Super Talk Outdoors, and we talked about this coalition that you'd put together and the importance of having a plan. And it makes it better projects that fit within the infrastructure of a plan. I just saw a little blip. Kyle, we're still good, buddy? Still good? Okay, good. We're still rolling. So we'll come back to that in just a second. Elections. First of all, we got voter ID now, and how I want to know how that's going. And what's your read on why, even with, I think, general excitement around elections in general, what's your read on the low voter turnout?
Yeah, that's a tough question and a sad one when you see roughly 11% turnout in the June primary area, and that was just disappointing for us. So one of the things that we try to do is really go around the state and encourage people, talk about the process, educate them, so get them more comfortable with how elections actually work in Mississippi. Once we feel like they're getting comfortable with that, hopefully they'll continue to come out. Promote the vote. We spend a lot of time in our schools. Our ambassador program, we've got 56 high school seniors that we're helping educate them on elections in Mississippi, how state government works, and then mentoring them as well about coming back to the state when they get done. But all of them are going to be working on voter registration drives in their schools. So we're doing all that we can to get the word out. But again, it takes people participating and understanding why it's important that we get out to vote, having our voice heard. That's what runs government. So if you're unfamiliar with the process, please reach out, ask questions. We're happy to educate you on that. But also, if you see things going on in your community that you're not appreciative of, get out there and vote. That's your voice to say, hey, look, we need to go in a different direction.
Yeah, I used to, as a publisher, and regular listeners know this, I used to speak a lot about this whole notion of newspapers had an important role, First Amendment obligation in communities to provide news and information to people to help keep democracy viable. I mean, it's important for people to have the information they need. They can choose then how they want to stand on a particular issue or how they want to stand on a particular candidate, and then go use that incredible vote. I mean, what a power that is in this nation to be able to vote for our leaders. It's a sacred right we have, isn't it?
It is. And you talk about all the people, Ricky, that went and gave all that they had for us to have that right. The men and women that, fought for this freedom that we have, and just for us to not take that for granted. And again, we've always encouraged folks, please get educated about the issues, be engaged. An educated and engaged electorate really helps government to be better. So I encourage folks to hold us accountable, and you do that at the ballot box.
You know this because you and I have chatted about this before, and I mentioned a little bit about it when we first started this show. But the whole notion of human trafficking, it comes in a bunch of different forms. I'm always touched by the fact that when I talk to experts about it, it could be as close to a single person as maybe a neighbor whose child they're putting up for human trafficking. It could play that kind of a role. But anyway, it comes in so many different forms, and it is a really terrible part of our society today. And I was impressed that recently you started a Mississippi Business Against Trafficking, and you brought initially some key partners into that conversation. I thought it was a very diverse group that you brought into the conversation. Some people would tend to think of them as being maybe proprietors of human trafficking, and they're not, and that's why they're on the team. But they employ a lot of people and they impact a lot of people. Why was this important for you?
So, Ricky, it really goes back to the legislative days. I had a group of ladies come and talk to me. So they wanted to come visit about human trafficking. And I just thought, well, that's Las Vegas and LA and New York. That's not really here. And they broke my heart with the stories that are happening in Mississippi. And the one that really caught my attention was a grandfather that was using his granddaughter for his drug money over in Lincoln County, and just really as a father of daughters, broke my heart. And so we started working on legislation back in my days in the Senate. Appreciate Speaker Gunn and the work that he's done. We partnered up on several issues. But as I got out of the legislature and into the Secretary of State's office, that was an issue that was really important to me. And so we tried to figure out how can we do more from the Secretary of State's office. And I looked at some other states. Texas is the one that really caught my attention first, and they had TBAT, which was Texas Businesses Against Trafficking. So as you know, the Secretary of State, and as we just mentioned, business services, we interact with businesses all over this state. So if you're a business and you come locate in Mississippi, you're going to have an interaction with our office. So we thought, look, with that connection with our business community, let's educate our business community, their employees, on what human trafficking actually is. What are the different forms, the different types? If I see it, who do I even report that to? So that's what MBAT does. We're going to give training out to our businesses. It has absolutely taken off since we announced. So it's really fun to watch all our businesses. And as you mentioned, the partners, that's the important piece that people sometimes don't think about. Well, where is this happening? So the massage industry, they're involved with us, hotels, convenience stores, the Mississippi Braves. it doesn't matter where you are in life. You're probably going to run into it at some point in time. You may not recognize it, but you're going to see it at some point in time. So getting that education out there and the training out there for these individuals is really important to us. So we're excited about that.
It is important, and what I've been pleased to see is that statewide leaders, obviously local leaders across the state, there's a lot of focus on it today, and it's just something you got to be constantly thinking about. When people think about human trafficking, typically, as I said before, they tend to think about this faraway place, Africa, or whatever. That it doesn't happen here, but it happens in your neighborhood, and it can be, oh my God, the impact that it's having on kids especially, but just about anyone who's caught up in that terrible place. It's a sad part of our society. It's something we better be focused on, and we better be doing everything in our power as leaders to get that scourge of society out of our society. So anyway,
no doubt.
Yeah.
One of the things really quickly, and we'll go to break.
Let's do this. Hold your thought. We'll get at the end of the segment. We'll pick it up on the other side. When we get back, we'll continue our conversation with Michael Watson, Secretary of State for Mississippi. See you after this. Welcome back to Coast View. When we went to break, we were talking about human trafficking, and Michael Watson, the Secretary of State for Mississippi, was about to make a point. And then I have one final comment, and then we're going to shift gears and move on to some other topics. But what were you about to say, Michael?
Yeah, so it's one of those things, and we can talk policy and politics and in theory all the time, but with human trafficking, it's not just policy, it's not just theory. When you engage and you train and you get someone who says, "Hey, I saw something happening and I report it," you're actually saving a life. So this isn't just theory or policy. This is actual, touching lives across this state, and so that's another reason why it's so important to us to be engaged, to help folks, not only spot it but also know who to call and talk to about it.
I was always on the subject when I was a publisher, and just always had interest in it, because you learn things when you're in public life and you have the opportunity to meet with leaders who have concerns. Something like human trafficking is something that would come up, because the more you get into the trenches and the more you hear the individual stories, the more you realize that as a leader, how can I ignore this? I have to do something about it. And what it did for me, and you alluded to it a second ago, is it makes you sort of look at your own life and the people who you're surrounded by, and my kids and my grandkids, and I look at my granddaughters in particular. But this is not just about granddaughters. I mean, it's young boys, young girls. Lots of people are engaged and forced to be in this situation. But I think about how pure they are and how innocent they are, and how much we work as grandfathers and fathers to protect them. And unfortunately, some don't have that. They don't have that protection mechanism, and for them, it just becomes a survival. And the impact on them is just so sad and so incredible. And one life change, man, is worth the effort. But we can do better than that, and we will do better than that, and we are doing better than that as a state. We just got to stay focused on it. What gets measured gets done. There's no doubt about that. 82 county tour. You're really focused on you're from the coast, but you've long since been a statewide official, and you're playing like that now, aren't you?
We are, and our 82 county tour, Ricky, we've talked about this a little bit, but if you build relationships with people and you can show them, I care enough to come to your office to ask you how I can better serve you, that's how you build a team. That's how you build leadership in our state. And so a perfect example was when COVID hit, and we had to figure out, how do we engage the electorate to make them feel safe when they go vote in their precincts? Well, you know what? We're going to talk to those clerks and the commissioners that we've visited with already. What are they doing in their counties? And so having those relationships, we're not always going to agree. And I tell them every time I go to them, we're not always going to agree. And the key here is, though, if we have a relationship where that I care, we can have those hard conversations a little bit easier. And again, I won't always be right. And they've proved me that before. I don't know everything. But dealing with these experts on the ground that dealing with elections every day across this state has been really helpful for us. So we're at 78 now. I got 4 to go. It's a big state. We've had some great visits, though.
It is a big state, man. It is. I have my place up in the Delta, and I love spending time there. And, the drive there is a lot easier. And I think you and I may have chatted a little bit about that last time we talked. But, man, now that 49 is finished, It's I can actually get home in 3.5 hours from the Delta now. Usually that was definitely a 4-hour trip, and the reason why I'm not getting hung up in that area of 49 right out just south of Jackson. It's amazing to me, honestly, Michael, that it took so long to get that resolved. I mean, how many years did you drive that as a legislator and think, oh my God, what is taking so long?
I remember being in college, going up through there and seeing the road work going on. So it was longer than that. It's been a while.
It has definitely been a while. One of the things that I remember reading on your site something about you wanted the Secretary of State's office to be focused on customer service. You wanted to where you're conservative. But I always say you're conservative with an open mind. I mean, you're certainly conservative, but you are taking sort of a business approach to your office. And we know that regulation is killing business. We know that the Secretary of State's office was literally, I don't know, it was clogged with regulations. And what that means is you got to go in there and re-engineer it. You can't just go tweak that, because if you tweak that, it might affect this over there. You really have to take a holistic approach to that. What you learn in doing sort of a current process analysis of the Secretary of State's office, it created a compelling case for change, didn't it?
It did. And that's been so fun for me. Again, we talked about human trafficking, and it's not just theory policy. You're actually saving lives. Well, when we talk about our Tackle the Tape initiative and our 29 by 29 initiative, where we're actually dealing with regulations and cutting them, tackling that tape, that helps small businesses actually be able to get across that hurdle. Because, when you have a regulatory burden that makes it hard for you to start a business, that hurts all of our families, that hurts our communities, that hurts our entire state. So every chance that we get to cut a regulation or to help navigate that regulatory burden, we were just dealing with USDA the other day. And Rick, I got to tell you this story really quickly.
Sure, no, there's no rush. Go for it. Yeah,
it's a grocery store in Louisville, Mississippi, and they were having some problems with USDA. So I called the state director here, and he was traveling that day. But his assistant emailed me back, and I appreciated that. And he said, look, we don't actually deal with that on this side of DHS. You're going to have to talk to somebody on the other side of USDA. And that's okay. That's fine. Can you give me a contact person over there? And he sent me a phone number, no name, no anything, and said, hey, just call this number. And so I emailed back and said, man, look, can you give me a contact person at USDA, someone that you work with that I can talk to help this citizen? Sent me a different telephone number the next time. And I'm sitting here thinking, this is the sitting Secretary of State asking for a contact within your organization so I can help a citizen of Mississippi. Not that it's Michael Watson, but just the sitting Secretary of State. I got so frustrated, and it just made me remember that this is why you're doing what you're doing, dealing with bureaucracy, dealing with this red tape. If a citizen would have tried to make that phone call, there's no way in the world they'd have gotten help. And that is so frustrating to me. Within the week, though, I called Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, and she got me to a contact with USDA. Within a week, we had the doors open in that grocery store. But those are the small things that, it's just a small grocery store. I get it. But that's life for people in Wolfsville to go get their groceries and feed their family. So things like that you're actually making a difference has really been so much fun for us to cut that regulatory burden.
But you have to look at it. Unfortunately, people in government roles don't look at what they do too often, unfortunately, as serving customers.
That's right.
And you think about the kind of streamlining that has taken place at most corporations in America, where they're trying to figure out, how do I make this work better? How do I cut the amount of red tape that customers have to deal with and do this using all the latest technology and capabilities? Governments are just slow to do that. It's almost like you don't have a goal to serve customers more, as much as you've got a goal to sort of preserve the status quo, whatever that is. That makes it hard culturally to kind of cut through it, doesn't it?
It does. And one of the things that I've told our office, when you pick that phone up, you never know who you're dealing with, number one. Number two, it may be their only interaction with government. So let's make it a good one. We do not say no at first. If we have to say no eventually because that's the law, I get it. But we're going to try every way we can to help somebody because, again, as I remind folks, we work for you. We're the servants here. Y'all pay our salary. And so I tell people all the time, even if it's not a Secretary of State issue, call our office. 9 times out of 10, we're going to know who to call to get you some help. And normally they call me back pretty quickly. So I just encourage all of your listeners, if you can't get an answer from a state agency, call us. We'll get you an answer and we'll get you connected to the right people.
It requires you to have a team on board with that goal, doesn't it?
Incredible team at our office. And I'll tell you this, Ricky, coming out of the state legislature, too many times I think legislators kind of have this negative connotation or conception of state workers. They're just 8 to 5 folks and they go home. They don't care about what they're doing. And there are those that do that. I get that. But when I went to the Secretary of State's office, and I can call names up and down the line of just the good Mississippians that actually care, that want to make a difference, that are there to help Mississippians, I just swell with pride when I talk about our team. And, it could be Carla Thornhill, my chief of staff from Philadelphia, Mississippi, all the way down to Matt Maloof, who runs in our business services sector, kind of runs the mail room and does stuff in finance. So I could, again, name a ton of folks, and they all, you see me all the time, but it's not just me. It really is us. And we got a great team.
Well, when you talk about tackle the tape, there's a lot. I mean, it's a great slogan, and it's about cutting the red tape. It's about streamlining all that. But when you go to your website, which I did this morning, read sort of the plan, so to speak, and what you discovered, and you actually use the same methodology in looking at the conservation efforts for the state. But and I'd be curious, actually, where did that framework come from? Where you understand that we have to have a mission, and the mission is that we're gonna streamline this, and we're gonna cut some costs for sure, but we're gonna make it easier for people to navigate all these various systems that the Secretary of State has to say grace over. We can have a goal around that, but then we got to do the current process work, and man, that's hard. That's where you're breaking down the steps in the process for everything that you do, and saying, okay, how can we make this better? What I saw on your website is the result of doing that analysis, and just how cumbersome it had become, et cetera, et cetera. It was very compelling. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll shift gears and actually move to the conservation planning work that I think is going to feed in to the efforts around the need, and now that we have the Conservation Trust Fund. With Michael Watson, Secretary of State. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Coast View. I have Michael Watson, the Secretary of State for Mississippi, and we were actually getting a little bit into the nuts and bolts of the tackle the tape effort that his office has been engaged with. And I'm going to give him an opportunity to sort of respond to the notion of that specific to tackle the tape. But one of the comments I said during the break was, as a former CEO, the methodology that he's deploying here is very familiar with me, to me. I was engaged in strategic planning for many, many years. And roadmaps help create a common language, helps get everybody on the same page. It helps create a compelling case for action. It helps develop visions for where you want to go. But it's not common actually to see roadmaps like this being deployed in government. Where did your knowledge of that come from, Michael? Where did you find the understanding of what success might look like if you deployed a roadmap like this?
Well, a lot of times that kind of comes in through the legislative process. When you have a goal in mind, the end game is, well, I have to look at all the statutes to see what all plays here. What's the interaction from different pieces of the legislature, of regulation, of different agencies. So understanding, to get to that goal, you got to start at the bottom and figure it all out. It's kind of part of it. But the second piece that I would say, Ricky, is when we got into the office and we saw the OLRC, the Occupational Licensing Review Commission. It oversees 29 boards and commissions on which sits the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Governor. We knew that was in place, and I was happy to support that in the legislature when we passed that into law. But we kind of started thinking, these are only 29 boards and commissions. There's so many other regulations out there that we can tackle. What is it that we can do to launch a plan to do that? And so somehow tackle the tape just popped in my mind. And so we set our group down around the table. Colby Williams was one of the phenomenal just minds in our office. Lee Janis, again, I could go through all of them. But we sat down at the table and I said, this is what I want to do. Let's put a roadmap together to get there. And here's what I'm thinking. What are y'all thinking? And again, when you can have a team around you that are smart people that want to see success and that want to do good for Mississippi, that's where good things happen. And so we just mapped the thing out. And one of the pieces of it, which is really cool how it feeds in, is our 29 by 29. Going back to the OLRC, we've got those 29 boards and commissions. So we've said, look, we're going to look at every regulation under all 29 of these boards and commissions. We can't do it ourselves, so let's pull some people in. So Stennis Institute at Mississippi State, AFP, Mercatus Institute. We put all these people in to help us go through these regulations. So by the year of 2029, we will have gone through every single regulation from all 29 of these boards and commissions to cut as many as we can to make it easier for Mississippi businesses to succeed. So kind of seeing all that come together and the puzzle pieces fit in, it takes a team of smart people, and really proud of our group.
But Michael, it is, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does happen. And, elected officials who do this well tend to get reelected. But it is rare to see a statewide elected official come in and be less concerned about reelection and more concerned about putting things in place that make it better for citizens. And it comes out in a bunch of different ways. I mean, it's interesting. Your job has embedded in it conflict. I mean, just no way around. Like, I'll give you an example. Not to bring up, it just is what it is. Tidelands management. That's a really tough subject, because people sit on different sides of that. You've had a goal to really focus on. I was involved. Obviously, I was involved after Hurricane Katrina to get land based. I was the chairman of the tourism group for the Governor's Commission, and was deeply engaged in the conversation with leadership in our state around having dockside gaming. And we intrinsically made a promise to a lot of really important casino companies at the time that we wanted them to be able to rebuild, and we had to get land-based gaming done. But we also said we're not going to change the rules on your mid-course. And there's been some efforts to do that, but I'm not trying to get into the nuts and bolts of that, as much as I'm trying to say that in the midst of all of this, there's conflict to manage, and it's very, very legal, and they're passionate people on both sides of the issue. But it can be tough at times, can't it?
It can, and I think, Ricky, that's where it comes in. I tell people this kind of really all the time. I don't have to have this job. My title as Secretary of State is not what defines me. It's not defining who I am. My title as a Christian, as a dad, as a brother, as a husband. Those are the things that matter to me. So while I'm here, we're going to abide by the law, and we're going to do our best to be a servant. My dad's a pastor, and growing up watching him serve people really is kind of what was drilled into my heart. So how do you help the most Mississippians possible? What are the things that we can do to make it better here in Mississippi? And so that's what my goal is. My goal is not to get reelected. My goal is to do good while I'm here. And typically when you do good and when you serve Mississippians, they respect that and maybe one day reward that. Who knows? But my job is to do the best I can while I'm here.
I got you. Anyway, congratulations on the efforts around trying to, streamline the operation, making it better for people. Because, man, you think about the amount of interaction with your department and you're what you have to say grace over in one way or another by thousands and thousands of Mississippians. It makes a real difference. It really does. And I hope you have continued success in sort of zeroing in on that. Anything else you want to say about that before we shift gears to conservation?
No, I would just remind your listeners, if you see some kind of regulation that's harmful for your business or that you're aware of, please reach out to us or Tackle the Tape website there. You can respond and give us a heads up on something that we need to go tackle. So we all have to do this together. I can't read every regulation in the codes and in the regulatory books, but Mississippians can. And so when they see something that's harmful, please let us know and we'll get to work.
You bet. Okay. Look, I worked for 2 years on the Conservation Trust Fund, and I've always had a love for the outdoors, but I was concerned our state was behind, one of two states in the Southeast that didn't have such a fund, and not having that fund put us in a bad position where we couldn't get really over $1 billion in matching funds at the federal level. Right. We had big debates about private land, whether private land should be involved, but over 80% of the land in Mississippi is private land, and you can't be serious about conservation if you don't engage it. What was impressive about what you did, while that it took 2 years, we got it done. There's some tweaks that still need to be made, but the reality is we've got it now, and we can. The trustees have been put together now. We're going to be soon looking at specific projects, and hopefully there'll be a huge amount of priority placed on those projects that have identified federal matching funds, so that we can do Georgia did and take $20 million and turn it into nearly $100 million. That's the kind of match that's available on some of these programs, a lot of them inside the Farm Bill, incidentally, as you well know. But what was interesting about what you did, as I was, doing here on the coast with CoastView, talking to people like Alex Littlejohn and a long list of others. And then, of course, as I started to have similar conversations on Super Talk Outdoors, some with you and some with many others that are in the conservation community, I learned along the way that you actually had pulled them into a process where you were thinking about, okay, as the Secretary of State with this responsibilities I have around helping to sort of establishing Mississippi as sort of the capital conservation in the state. I mean, the United States, we have the ability, man. Some of the people you brought into the fold, I mean, they were who's who in the conservation community. They've written a book on private land conservation, for example.
Right.
That was really important to you, and I'm confident actually now that that's actually your efforts in that arena are going to feed in to the Board of Trustees in a way where they're not going at this blind. And ironically, Joe Cloyd, who serves on the committee, and I had a conversation last night, and he's wanting to learn more about this planning effort. And I'm assuming at some point you guys will connect. But it's intense, and the opportunities are significant, and the partners that you've amassed are very significant. And we have unbelievable potential in this area now, don't we?
We do. It's incredible, Ricky. And when you look at the Conservation Task Force that we put together, what I think it's going to be is a phenomenal resource for the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund Board. We've been on all of those meetings, listening to their planning and moving forward. And one of the things that keeps coming back up, and Joe and I have talked about this probably since you guys have talked, but basically we need a plan. We need an overarching plan for the entire state. And that was really one of the goals of the Conservation Task Force. And so DMR has a plan, IHL has a plan, Wildlife Fisheries and Parks has a plan. A lot of folks have plans, but they're not united as a whole for the entire state. And so that's what our long-term goal is. Let's find all of these plans that we have, because they have some really good things included in them. But let's mesh them all together for an incredible, just statewide plan. That's the vision for the future of Mississippi. So then our Stewardship Trust Fund group can look at, hey, what is the plan? Let's just walk down the list here. What does Mississippi need? Let's address those issues. And again, I think you're going to see some wonderful work coming from those guys.
Yeah, I think why it's important is this, that, you got a new Board of Trustees, which is a terrific group, by the way, really, really high profile, smart people, no question about it. And they're all strategically driven, and they don't want to make project selections in a vacuum. They want to see that what's being selected fits with helping us achieve our best goals. So you can have two projects, both of them are great. Both of them have some matching funds, but this one actually fits into the plan and will help sort of move toward this a little bit better. That's what they need. They need to make decisions with a map in front of them. And it's hard to make best decisions if you don't have the map in front of you. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Michael Watson, Secretary of State. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to CoastView. I'm with my friend Michael Watson, the Secretary of State for Mississippi, a coast boy in a statewide office that has really, really taken his role as a state leader incredibly seriously. And it's great to always have time to visit with him. We've had tremendous visits here on CoastView and also on my network shows, Super Talk Outdoors. When we went to break, we were just sort of winding up the conversation around the opportunities in front of us in the conservation arena. The point I want to make, and you can make whatever point you want to make about it, and then we'll shift gears, but we finally got it done. And gosh, is it important for us to hit it out of the park, because if we're going to go back to the legislature and get, for example, a dedicated funding source, which I think is really important. We're lucky in that now Delbert Hosemann and, of course, the Speaker, Philip Gunn, are aligned around putting as much as $20 million, in there this year. And I think that's going to be their goal for subsequent years. But, there won't always be there. There'll be new leadership. And it makes it so much more cumbersome when you got to go back to the legislature every year and rally the troops to get the money. I think the fact that we have bipartisan support and everyone is sort of on the same page about what the opportunities are for Mississippi. Getting a dedicated funding source is important, but in order to have those kind of conversations, we got to come out of the gate on this thing showing how the matching funds work and having all these incredible organizations engaged and finding best practices all over the nation and putting them in place here. And that's what we got to do, isn't it?
It is. And being on those meetings with the board, Ricky, it's been really encouraging for me, the expediency with which they're working, the sincerity that I hear when they talk about just those type of topics. Look, we got to make sure the legislature understands this is a big opportunity for Mississippi. We've got to knock it out of the park on these first few projects. So excited that they understand the vision, but also that they're so connected and working really hard to get it done as fast as possible.
Well, you got, again, Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, so Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks Foundation, James Cummings. I mentioned a minute ago that you had someone on your team that literally wrote the book on private land conservation, and that's James Cummings. The fact that we have people like that in this state. I mentioned Alex Littlejohn a few minutes ago from Nature Conservancy, but one of the real stars in the state. And now he's been appointed to two really important national conservation efforts that involve North America and Mexico. And again, what we're going to learn from the work that they're doing outside the state is where the best practices are and how we can bring that back here and make sure that we come out of the gate addressing needs, of course, but being innovative. We need to be innovative. And I think they've assembled a board of trustees for this Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund, proven leaders with incredible success in their background, strategically driven. And people like Joe Cloyd, for example, from coastal Mississippi, that was appointed by Delbert Hosemann. You've got people that are going to ask the right questions, and know they came to work. They came to make a difference, and they're going to make a difference, and that's good to see, isn't it?
It is, and really the how it's woven together. We talk about Joe here, and I've never really thought of Joe as a huge hunter. I know he fishes, but listening to those meetings and the questions that Joe has asked in those conversations, it's just fun, again, to see the different pieces that are really coming together and see the broader picture and how they're working together. So we've got some smart folks that are again, driven. And you mentioned James and Alex and Ed. We've talked about Ed before, but what Mississippians don't understand is the amount of intelligent, smart national leaders we have right here at home. And when we can put those folks in the same room like we've done with the Conservation Task Force and put a plan together for Mississippi, it's just a matter of time, I think, before Mississippi is a national leader in this effort.
Yeah, I didn't want Ed Penny from Ducks Unlimited. I didn't want Ed or Alex or James or any number of others that you had already been in touch with. I didn't want any of them to be on the board of trustees, because if they were, there would have been a conflict of interest. We need them on the outside working. We need them,
That's right,
bringing plans and encouraging plans and educating others and being a part of the process to help Mississippi be innovative. And so far, a lot of steps have already fallen, and we're moving in that direction. We're moving in the right direction, and hopefully the work that you did sort of parallel to that around. Let's see what's possible. Let's look at a plan for Mississippi that fits in like a glove to their efforts. I know it will, and it's exciting in that regard for sure. Hey, so look, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what's your future plans politically?
So, Ricky, I got asked that question early on in my Senate career. It was actually the first session. I was at home speaking to a school of fifth graders, and one of the kids asked when I got through speaking, he said, what are you going to run for next? President? I said, whoa, settle down. I just found out where the Capitol was. I know where the restroom is now. But my response to him has been the one that I've said the entire time. And, I don't have a job picked out that I really want to do. It's always been, for instance, I never wanted to be Secretary of State. Growing up, I never said, well, man, I can't wait to be Secretary of State. But I felt like that the Lord opened these doors, and I felt competent to serve in this position. And so it's been an honor to serve as Secretary of State. And so whatever comes from here, it really is. When there's an opportunity that I can do more good, and I pray about it and get a piece about it, we'll see. But I don't have a position picked out. Just when the opportunity arises and I get a good piece, we'll take a shot.
Governor Michael Watson, I can see that in your future at some point. You're young and bright and have made a tremendous impact, and you're a terrific statewide leader. Maybe one day we'll see you in the governor's seat. I'm sure that you have to have that somewhere in the back of your mind. Listen, Michael, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend.
You too, buddy. Have a great one.
You bet. We really enjoy our visits. And look, we'll see you soon. We won't have such a big break between the time that we meet next time. So this has been Secretary of State Michael Watson from Mississippi. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.